Few individuals in history have amassed a fortune as immense as Andrew Carnegie's. A man of both immense wealth and complexity, Carnegie's net worth after selling his company would be equivalent to an astonishing 2% of America's GDP today. In this video, we'll delve into the incredible journey of a Scottish immigrant with just 5 years of schooling, who rose from poverty to become the richest man in the world. Andrew Carnegie was born on November 25, 1835, in a modest two-story cottage on Moody Street in Dunfermline, Scotland. He was the son of William, a hand-loom weaver of fine damask linen, and his wife, Margaret. As the eldest of 3 children, Andrew endured the hardships of a family struggling to make ends meet. His sister Anne was born in 1840, but tragically passed away in infancy, while his younger brother Thomas was born in 1843. The Carnegie family shared their cramped living space with another family, occupying a single room. The ground floor of the cottage served as a weaving workshop. At the time of Andrew's birth, his father's weaving skills were in demand due to the U.S. lifting tariffs on linen products. In 1836, William moved his family to a slightly larger house on Edgar Street and acquired additional looms. However, the good times did not last. The Panic of 1837 in America and the reintroduction of tariffs led to a sharp decline in demand for Scottish linens. Simultaneously, the Industrial Revolution allowed factories to produce linen more cheaply, with steam-powered looms, drastically undercutting traditional hand weavers. By the early 1840s, the Carnegies were in dire financial straits, forcing them to move back into a tiny cottage on Moody Street. While William lacked business acumen, Margaret Carnegie was a natural entrepreneur, a trait she passed on to her son. To keep the family afloat, she began selling confectionery, vegetables, and potted pies from a makeshift sweetie shop in their home. She also turned to cobbling shoes, a skill she had learned from her father, becoming the family's primary breadwinner. Andrew Carnegie's entrepreneurial spirit emerged early. He funded his hobby of keeping rabbits and pigeons by naming each animal after his playmates, who would then feed them. By age 10, he was keeping accounts for his mother's grocery shop and selling gooseberries on the side. Although he had limited formal education, Carnegie developed decent arithmetic and literacy skills, fostered by his maternal uncle, political activist George Lauder Sr., who also ignited Andrew's lifelong love of books. Like Lauder, Carnegie's father and maternal grandfather, Thomas Morrison, were involved in the Chartist movement, which advocated for better working conditions and political representation for Britain's working class. However, the movement's decline in the late 1840s, combined with the Carnegies' worsening poverty, led William and Margaret to make the difficult decision to emigrate to the United States with their 2 sons. After a harsh winter in 1847-1848, the Carnegies sold their belongings, including their last loom, to fund their passage to America. They planned to join Margaret's twin sisters, Annie and Kitty, who were living in Allegheny, Pennsylvania. On May 19, 1848, the family embarked on the former whaling ship Wiscasset, enduring a 50-day journey to New York. They then traveled to Allegheny by coach, canal, rail car, and steamboat, finally settling in 2 rooms above a local weaver's shop. William tried to support the family by weaving tablecloths to sell door-to-door, but his business failed. With his father's business faltering, it was again Margaret who kept the family going, earning around $4 a week, $155 in today's money, by cobbling shoes. Andrew, meanwhile, found work as a bobbin boy at the Scottish-owned Anchor Cotton Mills in Pittsburgh, where he endured grueling 12-hour days, 6 days a week, for just $1.20 a week. William worked alongside his son at the mill for a time, but eventually returned to his loom, further straining the family's finances. Fortunately, Andrew caught the eye of John Hay, a Scottish bobbin manufacturer who hired him to tend the steam engine and fire the boiler in his factory. Although the work was perilous and paid only $2 a week, around $78 in 2024 money, it was a slight improvement. Carnegie would later recall having nightmares about the boiler exploding. A year later, Carnegie secured a job as a messenger boy for the O'Reilly Telegraph Company, a position that thrilled him and, as he wrote in his autobiography, lifted him into paradise. Earning $2.50 a week, $100 today, Carnegie used his impressive memory to master the locations of Pittsburgh's most important businesses, forging connections that would serve him well in the future. Carnegie quickly became one of the first people in America who could decipher telegraph messages by ear. In June 1851, he was promoted to substitute operator, earning $4 a week, on par with his mother's income. Ever eager to learn, Carnegie spent his free time at the Free Library of Colonel James Anderson, where he educated himself on a wide range of subjects. By 1852, Carnegie had advanced to the role of assistant operator, earning $5.77 a week, about $230 today, making him the primary breadwinner for his family. At just 16 years old, he was already well known among Pittsburgh's most prominent figures, thanks to his work and natural ability to build relationships. Carnegie's real break came when Thomas A. Scott, the newly appointed general superintendent of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, needed a private secretary and telegraph operator to help monitor rail traffic. Carnegie, who had already earned Scott's trust, was the natural choice. Carnegie began working at the Pennsylvania Railroad Company on February 1, 1853, at age 17, earning $8.08 a week, equivalent to $325 today. However, tragedy struck in 1855 when William Carnegie died at the age of 51, leaving Andrew with an even stronger drive to succeed and support his mother and younger brother. Carnegie's work ethic and acumen impressed Scott, who mentored him and even initiated his first investment. In 1856, Scott tipped Carnegie off about an opportunity to buy 10 shares in the Adams Express Investment Company. Carnegie persuaded his mother to mortgage their home and purchase the stock for $500, roughly $18,000 in today's money. As the railroad industry boomed, Carnegie's dividends began to pour in. In 1858, Scott ensured that Carnegie received a 1/8 interest in a company producing sleeper cars, which Carnegie financed by taking out a $1,250 bank loan, equivalent to $47,000 today. Reinvesting his returns, Carnegie made several other lucrative investments. In 1859, Scott, now vice president of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, offered Carnegie the position of superintendent of the Western Division. Carnegie accepted and earned an annual salary of $1,500, or $56,000 today. He was also able to provide jobs for his family, hiring his 16-year-old brother Thomas as his personal assistant and arranging a role for his cousin Maria Hogan, who became America's first female telegraph operator. By 1860, Carnegie had repaid his bank loan with dividends from his investments, and his stake in the sleeping cars business was earning him over $5,000 a year, equivalent to $186,000 today. He later merged the sleeping cars business with George Pullman's company, a move that further boosted his wealth. When the American Civil War erupted in 1861, Carnegie was transferred to the War Department, where he organized the military telegraph service and coordinated the transportation of supplies by rail to Union forces. Despite the war's stress, Carnegie continued to make profitable investments, including in the steel and oil industries. After the Civil War ended in April 1865, Carnegie left the Pennsylvania Railroad Company to focus on his career as an investor and head up his new ironworks business, Keystone Bridge Company. which later became famous for building the Eads Bridge in St. Louis. By this time, Carnegie had moved to New York with his mother and had pledged to give away the surplus of his wealth to worthy causes. In his early 30s, Carnegie was already earning around $50,000 a year, an astonishing $947,000 in today's money, from his diverse investments. Nevertheless, he decided to focus on the iron industry, forming a series of ironworks that supplied metal for railroads, bridges, and other infrastructure projects. A visit to London in 1872 introduced him to Henry Bessemer's process for mass-producing steel cheaply, which Carnegie quickly recognized as the future of the industry. In 1873, Carnegie founded the steel rail business Carnegie, McCandless and Company, opening his first steel mill the following year. Throughout the 1870s, he took advantage of the economic downturn to acquire competing mills and suppliers, pioneering horizontal and vertical integration. By 1878, Carnegie's firm was valued at $1,250,000, $39 million today, with Carnegie owning nearly two-thirds of the shares. Carnegie continued to expand his empire, placing industrialist Henry Clay Frick in charge of operations in 1881 and acquiring Homestead Steel Works in 1883. By this time, Carnegie controlled much of America's steel production, making him one of the wealthiest people in the country. Tragedy struck in 1886 when Carnegie's mother and brother Thomas died within weeks of each other. The following year, Carnegie married Louise Whitfield, who signed a prenuptial agreement affirming Carnegie's commitment to give away the majority of his wealth during his lifetime. By 1889, Carnegie's control over the steel industry had made him one of America's richest men. Later that year, he published The Gospel of Wealth, an article advocating that the rich should use their wealth for the greater good of society. His philanthropic stance, combined with his support for trade unions and workers' rights, earned him global praise. However, Carnegie's reputation suffered in 1892 when a strike at Homestead Steel Works turned violent, resulting in the deaths of 12 people. Although Carnegie was in Scotland at the time and not directly involved, many blamed him for the tragedy. In 1897, Carnegie and Louise welcomed their only child, a daughter named Margaret. The following year, Carnegie purchased Skibo Castle in the Scottish Highlands, investing millions in its renovation. He also commissioned the construction of a mansion in Manhattan, which was completed in 1902 and is now home to the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. In 1901, Carnegie sold his steel business to financier J.P. Morgan for $480 million, equivalent to $17.4 billion today. At his peak, Carnegie's net worth was the modern-day equivalent of $375 billion, making him the richest person on the planet at that time. After selling his company, Carnegie retired from business to focus entirely on philanthropy, funding 2,509 libraries worldwide and numerous institutions bearing his name, including Carnegie Mellon University and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. By the time he passed away in August 1919, at the age of 83, Andrew Carnegie had given away the vast majority of his wealth. He endowed the remaining $135 million, $2.4 billion today, to the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Often regarded as one of the world's greatest philanthropists, Carnegie lived by his famous motto, "The man who dies thus rich, dies disgraced," a principle he adhered to until the end. If you have not seen it yet, I really recommend watching my last video of the most notorious financier of all time, J.P. Morgan. You won't believe his story until you've seen it. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button and also don't forget to subscribe.